Welcome back to Storytime with Belle, everyone. The last time we were together, I know we ended Chapter 5 a little abruptly, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that the chapter is so long. I wanted to make sure you got the full advantage of the adventure. I wanted you to think and wait and be held in suspense. I also like to introduce a special friend of mine, Lumiere. Lumiere is here to help bring light to you as well as me. He brought me so much comfort my first night in the castle by singing Be Our Guest. So, Lumiere, please stand over here. All right, thank you. Now, everyone else, please continue to be my guest as we continue The Princess Bride. Chapter 5, Part 2, The Announcements. Inigo. In the mountains of central Spain, set high in the hills above Toledo, was the village of Arabella. It was very small, and the air was always clear. That was all you could say that was good about Arabella. Terrific air. You could see for miles. But there was no work. The dogs overran the streets, and there was never enough food. The air, clean enough, was also too hot in daylight, freezing at night. As to Inigo's personal life, he was always just a trifle hungry. He had no brothers or sisters, and his mother died in childbirth. He was fantastically happy, because of his father, Domenico Montoya. Domenico Montoya was funny-looking and crotchety and impatient and absent-minded and never smiled. Inigo loved him. Totally. Don't ask why. There really wasn't any one reason you could put your finger on. Oh, probably Domenico loved him back. But love is many things, none of them logical. Domenico Montoya made swords. If you wanted a fabulous sword, did you go to Domenico Montoya? If you wanted a great balanced piece of work, did you go to the mountains behind Toledo? If you wanted a masterpiece, a sword for the ages, was it Arabella that your footsteps led you to? No. No, you went to Madrid, because Madrid was where the famous because Madrid was where lived the famous Yes. And if you had the money, and he had the time, you got your weapon. Yes was fat and jovial, and one of the richest and most honored men in the city. And he should have been. He made wonderful swords, and noblemen bragged to each other that they owned an original Yes. But sometimes, not often, mind you, maybe once a year, maybe less, a request would come for a weapon that was more than even Yes could make. When that happened, did Yes say, "Alas, I'm sorry, I cannot do it"? Nope. What he said was, "I'd be delighted. 50% down payment, please. The rest before delivery. Come back in a year. Thank you very much." The next day, he would set out for the hills behind Toledo. "So, Domenico," Yes would call out when he reached Inigo's father's hut. "So, yes." Domenico would return from the hut doorway. Then the two men would embrace, and Inigo would come running up, and Yes would rumple his hair, and then Inigo would make tea while the two men talked. "I need you," Yes would always begin. Domenico would grunt. "This very week I have accepted a commission to make a sword for a member of Italian nobility. It has to be jewel-encrusted at the handle, and the jewels are to spell out the name of his present mistress and—" No. That single word, and that alone. But it was enough. When Domenico Montoya said no, it meant nothing else but. Inigo, busy with the tea, knew what would happen now. Yes would use his charm. No. Yes would use his wealth. No. His wit. His wonderful gift of persuasion. No. He would beg, entreat, promise, pledge. No. Insults, threats. No. Finally, genuine tears. No. More tea, yes? Perhaps another cup, thank you. Then big, "Why won't you?" Inigo hurried to refill their cups so as to never miss a word. He knew they had been brought up together and had known each other over 60 years. No one never not loved one another deeply, and it thrilled him when he could hear them arguing. It was the strange thing. Arguing was all they ever did. Why? My fat friend asks me why. He sits there on his world-class ass and has the nerve to ask me why. Yes, come to me sometime with a challenge. Once, just ride up and say, Domenico, I need a sword for an 80-year-old man to fight a duel. And I would embrace you and cry, yes! Because to make a sword for an 80-year-old man to survive a duel, that would be something. Because the sword would have to be strong enough to win, yet light enough not to tire his weary arm. I would have to use all to perhaps find an unknown metal. I would have to use all my all to find perhaps an unknown metal, strong but very light, or deceive a different formula for a known one. Mix some bronze, some iron, and some air in the way ignored for 1,000 years. I would kiss your smelly feet for an opportunity like that, yes? That yes? But to make a stupid sword with stupid jewels in the form of stupid initials for some stupid Italian to thrill his stupid mistress? No, that I will not do. For the last time, I beg you, please. For the last time, I tell you, I am sorry. No. I gave my word the sword would be made, Yes said. I cannot make it. In all the world, no one but you. And you say no? Which means I have gone back on my commitment. Which means I have lost my honor. Which means that since honor is the only thing I care about, and since I cannot live without it, I must die. And since you are my dearest friend, I may as well die now with you, basking in your the warmth of your affection. And here Yeast would pull out a knife. It was a magnificent thing, a gift from Domenico on Yeast's wedding day. Goodbye, little Inigo, Yes would say to them. God grant you on your quota of smiles. It was forbidden for Inigo to interrupt. Goodbye, little Domenico, Yes would say then. Although I die in your hut, and although it is your stubborn fault that causes my ceasing, in other words, even though you are killing me, don't think twice about it. I love you, as I always have, and God forbid your conscience should give you any trouble. He pulled open his chest, brought the knife closer. The pain is worse than I imagined, Yes would cry. How can it hurt when the point of the weapon is still an inch away from your belly? Domenico asked. I'm anticipating. Don't bother me. Let me die unpestered. He brought the point to his skin, pushed it. Domenico grabbed the knife away. Someday I won't stop you, he said. Inigo set an extra place for supper. I was all set to kill myself, truly. Enough dramatics. What is on the menu for this evening? The usual gruel. Inigo, go check and see if there's anything by chance in my carriage outside. There was always a feast waiting in the carriage. And after the food and the stories would come the departure. And always before the departure would come the request. We would be partners, Yes would say, in Madrid. My name before yours on the sign, of course, but equal partners in all things. No. I'll write your name before mine. You are the greatest sword maker. You deserve to come first. Have a good trip back. Why won't you? Because, my friend, yes. You're very famous and very rich. And you should be, because you make wonderful weapons. But you also make them for any fool who happens along. I am poor. And no one knows me in all the world except you and Inigo. But I do not have to suffer fools. You are an artist, Yes said. No, not yet. A craftsman only. But I dream to be an artist. I pray that someday, if I work with enough care, if I am very lucky, I will make a weapon that is a work of art. Call me an artist then. I will answer. Yes entered his carriage. Domenico approached the window and whispered, I remind you only of this. When you get this jewel-initialed sword, claim it as your own. Tell no one of my involvement. Your secret is safe with me. Embraces and waves the carriage would leave. And that was the way of life before the six-fingered sword. Inigo remembered exactly the moment it began. He began to make lunch for them. His father always, from the time he was 6, let him do the cooking. When a heavy knocking came on the hut door. "Inside there," a voice boomed. "Be quick about it." Inigo's father opened the door. Your servant, he said. "You are a sword maker?" came the booming voice. "Of distinction. I have heard that it is true." "If only it were," Domenico replied. "But I have no great skills. Mostly I do repair work. Perhaps if you have a dagger blade that was dulling, I may be able to please you. But anything more is beyond me." Inigo crept up beside his father and peeked out. The booming voice belonged to a powerful man with dark hair and broad shoulders, who sat upon an elegant brown horse. A nobleman, clearly, but Inigo could not tell from what country. "I desire to have you make me the greatest sword since Excalibur." "Oh, I should read you guys King Arthur next." "I hope your wishes are granted," Domenico said. "And now, if you please, our lunch is almost ready, and I do not give you permission to move. You stay exactly where you are or risk my wrath, which, I must tell you in advance, is considerable. My temper is murderous. Now, what were you saying about your lunch?" "I was saying that it will be hours before it is ready. I have nothing to do with that dream of budging." "There are rumors," the nobleman said, "that deep in the hills behind Toledo lives a genius, the greatest sword maker of all time." "He lives here sometimes." "That must be your mistake. His name is Yes, and he lives in Madrid." "I will pay 500 pieces of gold for my desires," said the big-shouldered noble. "That is more money than all the men in this village will earn in all their lives," said Domenico. "Truly, I would love to accept your offer, but I am not the man you seek." These rumors led me to believe that Domenico Montoya would solve my problem. "What is your problem?" "I am a great swordman, but I cannot find a weapon to match my peculiarities, and therefore I am deprived of reaching my highest skills. If I had a weapon to match my peculiarities, there would be no one in all the world to equal me." "What are these peculiarities you speak of?" The noble held out his right hand. Domenico began to grow excited. The man had 6 fingers. "You see," the nobleman began. "Of course," Domenico interrupted. "The balance of the sword is wrong for you because every balance is conceived for 5 fingers. The grip of every handle cramps you because it's built for 5. For an ordinary swordman, it would not matter. But a great swordsman, a master, would have eventual discomfort. And the greatest swordman in the world must always be at ease. The grip of his weapon must be as natural as the blink of his eye, and cause him no more thought. Clearly you understand the difficulties," the nobleman began again. But Domenico had traveled where others would never reach him. Inigo had never seen his father so frenzied. The measurements, of course. Each finger, the circumference of the wrist, the distance from the 6th nail to the index pad. So the many measurements and your preferences. Do you prefer to slash or cut? If you slash, do you prefer left to right movements, or perhaps the parallel? When you do cut, do you enjoy an upward thrust? And how much power do you wish to come from the shoulder, and how much from the wrist? And do you wish your point coated so as to enter more easily, or do you enjoy seeing the opponents wince? So much to be done, and on he went until the noble dismounted and had almost taken him by the shoulders to quiet him. "You are the man of rumors," Domenico nodded. "And you will make me the greatest sword since Excalibur. I will beat my body into ruins for you. Perhaps I will fail, but no one will try harder. And payment? When you get the sword, then payment. Now let me get to work on measuring. Inigo, My instruments! Inigo scurried into the darkest corner of the hut. I insist on leaving something on account. It is not necessary. I may fail. I insist. All right. 1 gold piece. Leave that. But do not bother me with money when there is work that needs beginning. The noble took out 1 piece of gold. Domenico put it in a drawer and left without even a glance. Feel your fingers now, he said. Rub your hands hard. Shake your fingers. You will be excited when you do, and this handle must match your hand in that excitement. If I measure you when you are relaxed, there will be no difference. It's as much as a thousandth of an inch, and that could rob us of perfection. And that is what I seek. Perfection. I will not rest for less. The nobleman had to smile. And how long will it take to reach it? Come back in a year, Domenico said. And with that he set to work. Such a year. Domenico slept only when he dropped from exhaustion. He ate only what Inigo forced him to. He studied, fretted, and complained. He never should have taken the job. It was impossible. The next day he would be flying. He never should have taken the job. It was too simple to be worth his labors. Joy to despair, day to day, hour to hour. Sometimes Inigo would wake to find him weeping. What is it, father? It is not that I cannot do it. I cannot make the sword. I cannot make my hands obey me. I would kill myself. Except, what would you do then? Go to sleep, father. No, I don't need sleep. Failures don't need sleep. Anyway, I slept yesterday. Please, father, a little nap. All right, a few minutes to keep you from nagging. Some nights, Inigo would awake to see him dancing. What is it, father? It is that I have found my mistake, corrected my misjudgments. Then it will be done soon, father? It will be done tomorrow, and it will be a miracle. You are wonderful, father. I am more wonderful than wonderful. How dare you insult me? But the next night, more tears. What is it now, father? The sword. I cannot make the sword. But last night, father, you said you found your mistakes. I was mistaken. Tonight I found new ones, worse ones. I am the most wretched of creatures. Say you wouldn't mind if I killed myself, so I could end this existence. But I would mind, father. I love you, and I would die if you stopped breathing. You don't really love me. You're only speaking pity. What could pity the greatest sword maker in the history of the world? Thank you, Inigo. You're welcome, father. I love you back, Inigo. Sleep, father. Yes, sleep. A whole year of that. A year of the handle being right, but the balance being wrong. Of the balance being right, but the cutting edge too dull. Of the cutting edge sharpened, but that threw the balance off again. Off the balance, returning. But now the point was fat, as the point regained sharpness. Only now the entire blade was too short and had to go, and it all had to go. It all had to be thrown out. All had to be done again. Domenico's health began to leave him. He was always forever now. But he forced his frail shell on, because this had to be the finest since Excalibur. Domenico was battling legend, and it was destroying him. Such a year. One night, Inigo woke to find his father seated, staring, calm. Inigo followed the stare. The 6-fingered sword was done. Even in the hut's darkness, it glistened. At last, Domenico whispered. He could not take his eyes from the glory of the sword. After a lifetime, Inigo. Inigo, I am an artist. The big-shouldered nobleman did not agree. When he returned to purchase the sword, he merely looked at it a moment. Not worth waiting for, he said. Inigo stood in the corner of the hut, watching, holding his breath. You were disappointed? Domenico could scarcely get the words spoken. I'm not saying it's trash, you understand, the nobleman went on. but it's certainly not worth 500 gold pieces. I'll give you 10. It's probably worth that. Wrong! Domenico cried. It is not worth 10. It is not worth even 1. Here. He threw the drawer open where the gold piece had lain untouched to the air. The gold is yours. All of it. You have lost nothing. He took back the sword and turned away. I'll take the sword, the nobleman said. I didn't say I wouldn't take it. I only said I would pay what it was worth. Domenico whirled back. Bright eyes. You quipped. You haggled. Art was involved, and you saw only money. Beauty was here for the taking, and you saw only your fat purse. You lost nothing. There is no more reason for you remaining here. Please go. The sword, the nobleman said. The sword belongs to my son, Domenico said. I give it to him now. It is forever his. Goodbye. You're a peasant and a fool, and I want my sword. You're an enemy of art, and I pity your ignorance, Domenico said. They were the last words he would ever utter. They were the last words he ever uttered. The noble killed him then, with no warning. A flash of the nobleman's sword, and Domenico's heart was torn to pieces. Inigo screamed. He could not believe it. It had not happened. He screamed again. His father was fine. Soon they would have tea. He could not stop screaming. The village heard. 20 men were at the door. The nobleman pushed through him. That man attacked me. See? He holds a sword. He attacked me, and I defended myself. Now move from my way. It was lies, of course, but everyone knew it. But he was a noble. So what was there to do? They parted, and the nobleman mounted his horse. Coward! The nobleman whirled. Pig! Again the crowd parted. Inigo stood there, holding the 6-fingered sword, repeating his words. Coward! Pig! Killer! Someone tend the babe before he oversteps himself, the noble said to the crowd. Inigo ran forward then, standing in front of the nobleman's horse, blocking the nobleman's path. He raised the 6-fingered sword with both his hands and cried, I, Inigo Montoya, do challenge you, coward, pig, killer, ass, fool, to battle. Get out of my way. Move the infant. The infant is 10, and he stands, Inigo said. Enough of your family is dead for one day. Be content, said the noble. When you beg me for your death, then I shall be contented. Now dismount. The nobleman dismounted. Draw your sword. The nobleman unsheathed his killing weapon. I dedicate your death to my father, Inigo said. Begin. They began. It was no match, of course. Inigo was disarmed in less than a minute. But for the first 15 seconds or so, the noble was uneasy. During those 15 seconds, strange thoughts crossed his mind. For even at the age of 10, Inigo's genius was there. Disarmed, Inigo stood straight, very straight. He said not a word, begged nothing. I'm not going to kill you, the nobleman said, because you have talent, and you're brave. But you're also lacking in manners, and that's going to get you in trouble if you're not careful. So I shall help you get through this life by leaving you with a reminder that bad manners are to be avoided. And with that, his blade flashed 2 times, and Inigo's face began to bleed. 2 rivers of blood poured from his forehead to his chin, one crossing each cheek. Everyone knew it then. The boy was scarred for life. Inigo did not fall. The world went white behind his eyes, but he would not go to the ground. The blood continued to pour. The nobleman replaced his sword, mounted, rode on. It was only then that Inigo allowed darkness to claim him. He awoke to Yest's face. I was beaten, Inigo whispered. I failed him. Yest could only say, sleep. Inigo slept. The bleeding stopped after a day, and the pain subsided after a week. They buried Domenico, and for the first and last time, Inigo left Arabella, his face bandaged. He rode in Yest's carriage to Madrid, where he lived in Yest's house, obeyed Yest's commands. After a month, the bandages were removed, but the scars were still deep red. Eventually they softened, but they always remained the chief feature of Inigo's face. The giant parallel scars running one on each side, from temple to chin. For 2 years, Jest cared for him. And one morning, Inigo was gone. In his place were 3 words: I must learn, on a note pinned to his pillow. Learn? Learn what? What existed beyond Madrid that the child had to commit to memory? Yes, shrugged inside. It was beyond him. There was no understanding children anymore. Everything was changing too fast, and the young were different. Beyond him. Beyond him. Life was beyond him. The world was beyond him. You name it, it was beyond him. He was a fat man who made swords. That much he knew. So he made more swords, and he grew fatter, and the years went by. As his figure spread, so did his name. From all across the world they came, begging him for weapons. So he doubled his prices, because he didn't want to work too hard anymore. He was getting old. But when he doubled his prices, the news spread from duke to prince to king. They only wanted him more desperately. So the wait was 2 years for a sword, and the lineup of royalty was unending, and Yes was growing tired. So he doubled his prices again. And when that didn't stop them, he decided to triple his already doubled and redoubled prices, and besides that, all the work had to be paid for in jewels in advance, and had to wait up to 3 years, but nothing would stop them. They had to have swords by Yes or nothing, and even though the work was on the finest, it was nowhere at all what it once was. Domenico, after all, could no longer save him. The silly, rich men didn't notice. All they wanted was his weapons, and they fell over each other with jewels for him. Yes grew very rich and very heavy. Every part of his body sagged. He had the only fat thumbs in Madrid. Dressing took an hour, breakfast the same, everything went slowly. But he could still make swords, and people still craved them. I'm sorry, he said to the young Spaniard, who entered his shop one particular morning. The wait is up to 4 years, and even I am embarrassed to mention the price. Have your weapon made by another. I have my weapon, the Spaniard said, and he threw the 6-fingered sword across Yest's workbench. Such embraces. Never leave again, Yes said. I eat too much when I'm lonely. I cannot stay, Inigo said. I have come here to ask you one question. As you know, I have spent the last 10 years learning. Now, I come for you to tell me if I'm ready. Ready? For what? What in the world have you been learning? The sword. Madness, said Yes. You spent 10 entire years just learning to fence? No, not just learning to fence, Inigo answered. I did many other things as well. Tell me. Well, Inigo began. 10 years is what? About 3,600 days? And that's about... I figured this out once, so I remember pretty well. But 86,000 hours? Well, I always made it a point to get 4 hours sleep per night. That's 14,000 hours right there, leaving me perhaps 72 hours to account for. You slept. I'm with you. What else? Well, I squeezed rocks. I'm sorry. My hearing sometimes fails me. It sounds like you said you squeezed rocks to make my wrists strong, so I could control the sword. Rocks like apples. That size. I would squeeze them in each hand for perhaps 2 hours a day. And I would spend another 2 hours a day skipping and dodging and moving quickly so that my feet would be able to get into position to deliver properly the thrust of the sword. It's another 14 hours. I'm down to 58 hours now. 58,000 hours. I'm down to 58,000 now. Well, I sprinted 2 hours each day as fast as I could, so my legs, as well as my being quick, would also be strong. That gives me about 50,000 hours. That gets me down to about 50,000 hours. Yes, examine the young man before him. Blade thin, 6 feet in height, straight as a sapling, bright eyes, taut. Even motionless, he seemed whippet quick. In these last 50,000 hours, they have been spent studying the sword. Inigo nodded. Where? Wherever I could find a master. Venice, Bergs, Budapest. I could have taught you here. True. But you care for me. You would not have been ruthless. You would have said, Excellent pare, Inigo. Now that's enough for today. Let's have supper. That does sound like me, Yes admitted. But why was it so important? Why was it worth so much of your life? Because I cannot fail him again. Fail who? My father. I spent all these years preparing to find the six-fingered man, kill him in a duel. But he is a master, yes. He said as much, and I saw the way his sword flew at Domenico. I will not lose that duel. I must not lose that duel when I find him. So now I've come to you. You know swords and swordsmen. You must not lie. Am I ready? If you say I am, I will seek him through the world. If you say no, I will spend another 10 years and another 10 after that, if it is needed. So they went to Yes's courtyard. It was a late morning, hot. Yes put his body in the chair, and the chair in the shade. Inigo stood waiting in the sunshine. We need not test desire, and you know you have sufficient motive to deliver the death blow, Yes said. Therefore, we need only probe your knowledge and speed and stamina. We need no enemy for this. The enemy is always in the mind. Visualize him. Inigo drew his sword. The six-fingered man taunts you, Yes called. Do what you can. Inigo began to leap in the courtyard, the great blade flashing. He uses the Agrippa defense, Yes shouted. Immediately, Inigo shifted position, increased the speed of his sword. Now he surprises you with Bonetti's attack. Inigo was not surprised for long. Again, his feet shifted. His body moved a different position. Perspiration was pouring down his thin frame now, and the great blade was blinding. Yes continued to shout. Inigo continued to shift. The blade never stopped. At 3 p.m, Yes said, Enough. I am exhausted from watching. Inigo sheathed the six-finger sword and waited. You wish to know if I feel you are ready to duel to the death a man ruthless enough to kill your father, rich enough to buy protection, an older and more experienced and acknowledged master. Inigo nodded. I'll tell you the truth. It's up to you to live with it. First, there has never been a master as young as you. 30 years at least before that rank has been reached, and you are barely 22. Well, the truth is, you are an impetuous boy, driven by madness, and you are not now, and you never will be, a master. Thank you for your honesty, Inigo said. I must tell you, I hoped for better news. I find it very hard to speak just now. So if you'll excuse me, I'll be on my... I had not finished, he said. What else is there to say? I loved your father very dearly. That you know. But this you did not know. When we were very young, not yet 20, we saw with our own eyes an exhibition by the Corsican wizard Battista. I know of no wizards. It is the rank beyond master in swordsmanship, he said. Bastia was the last man so designated. Long before your birth, he died at sea. There have been no wizards since. And you would never in this world have beaten him. But I tell you this, he never in this world would have beaten you. Inigo stood for a long time. Inigo stood silent for a long time. I am ready then. I would not enjoy being the six-fingered man, Zal Yeast replied. The next morning, Inigo began the track down. He had it all carefully prepared in his mind. He would find the six-fingered man. He would go up to him. He would say simply, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." And then, then the duel. It was a lovely plan, really simple, direct, no frills. In the beginning, Inigo had all kinds of wild vengeance notions, but gradually, simplicity had seemed the better way. Originally, he had all kinds of little plays worked out in his mind. The enemy would beg and weep, the enemy would cringe and cry, the enemy would bribe and slobber and act in every way unmanly. But eventually, these two gave way in his mind to simplicity. The enemy would simply say, "Oh yes, I remember killing him. I'll be only too delighted to kill you too." Inigo had only one problem. He could never find his enemy. It never occurred to him there would be the least difficulty. After all, how many noblemen were there with 6 fingers on their right hands? Surely it would be the talk of whatever his vicinity happened to be. A few questions. Pardon, I'm not crazy, but have you ever seen a 6-fingered nobleman lately? And sooner or later, there would be an answer. Yes, but it didn't come sooner. And later wasn't the kind of thing you wanted to hold on to your breath for either. The first month wasn't all that discouraging. Inigo crisscrossed Spain and Portugal. The second month, he moved to France and spent the rest of the year there. The year following, that was his Italian year. Then came Germany and the whole of Switzerland. It was only after 5 solid years of failure he began to worry. By then, he had seen all of the Balkans and most of Scandinavia, and had visited the Florentines and the natives of Gilder, and then into Mother Russia, and down step by step the entire Mediterranean. By then, he knew what had happened. 10 years learning was 10 years too long. Too much had happened. The 6-fingered man was probably crusading in Asia, or getting rich in America, or a hermit in the East Indies, or dead. Inigo, at the age of 27, began having a few extra glasses of wine at night to help him sleep. At 28, he was having a few extra glasses to help him digest his lunch. At 29, the wine was essential to wake him up in the morning. His world was collapsing around him. Not only was he living in daily failure, something almost dreadful was beginning to happen. Fencing was beginning to bore him. He was simply too good. He would make his living during his travels by finding the local champion wherever he happened to be, and they would duel. Inigo would disarm him and accept whatever they happened to bet. With his winnings, he would pay for his food and his lodgings and his wine. But the local champions were nothing. Even in the big cities, the local experts were nothing. Even in the capital cities, the local masters were nothing. There was no competition, nothing to help him keep the edge. His life began to seem pointless, his quest pointless. Everything without reason. At 30, he gave up the ghost. He stopped his search, forgot to eat, slept only on occasion. He had his wine for company, and that was enough. He was a shell, the greatest fencing machine since the Corsican wizard. He was barely even practicing the sword. He was in that condition when the Sicilian found him. At first, the little humpback only supplied him with stronger wine. But then, through a combination of praising and nudging, the Sicilian began to get him off the bottle. Because the Sicilian had a dream. And his guile plus the Turk's strength plus the Spaniard's sword, they might become the most effective criminal organization in the civilized world. Which is precisely what they became. In dark places, their names whispered sharper than fear. Everyone had needs that were hard to fulfill. The Sicilian crowd, 2 was company, 3 a crowd even then, became more and more famous and more rich. Nothing was beyond or beneath them. Inigo's blade was flashing again. More than ever like lightning, the Turk's strength grew more prodigious with the months. But the hunchback was the leader. There was never doubt. Without him, Inigo knew where he would be, on his back, begging wine in some alley entrance. The Sicilian's word was not just law, it was gospel. And when he said, "Kill the man in black," all other possibilities ceased to exist. The man in black had to die. Inigo paced the cliff edge, fingers snapping. 50 feet below him, the man in black still climbed. Inigo's impatience was beginning to bubble beyond control. He stared down at the slow progress. From a crevice, jammed in the hand. Find the crevice, jam the hand in. 48 feet to go. Inigo slapped his sword handle with his fingers. Snapping seemed to go faster. He examined the hooded climber. Half hoped he would be the 6-fingered man. But no. This one had proper accompaniment of digits. 47 feet to go now. Now 46. "Hello there!" Inigo hollered when he could wait no more. The man in black glanced up and grunted. "I've been watching you." The man in black nodded. "Slow going," Inigo said. "Look, I don't mean to be rude," the man in black said finally, "but I'm rather busy just now, so try not to distract me." "I'm sorry," Inigo said. The man in black grunted. "I don't suppose you could speed things up," Inigo said. If you want to speed things up so much," the man in black said, clearly quite angry now, "you could lower a rope or a tree branch or find some other helpful thing to do." "I could do that," Inigo agreed, "but I don't think you would accept my help, since I'm only waiting up here so that I can kill you." "That does put a damper on our relationship," the man in black said then. "I'm afraid you'll just have to wait." 43 feet left. 41. "I could give you my word as a Spaniard," Inigo said. "No good," the man in black replied. "I've known too many Spaniards." "I'm going crazy up here," Inigo said. "Anytime you want to change places, I'll be too happy to accept." 39 feet and resting. The man in black just hung in space, feet dangling, the entire weight of his body, supported by the strength of his hands, jammed into the crevice. "Come along now," Inigo pleaded. "It's been a bit of a climb," the man in black explained, "and I'm weary. I'll be fine in a quarter of an hour or so." Another quarter hour? Inconceivable. "Look, we've got an extra piece of rope up here we didn't need when we made our original climb. I'll drop it down to you, and you grab hold and I'll pull up." "No good," the man in black repeated. "You might pull, but then again, you also might let go, since you're in a hurry to kill me, would certainly do the job quickly." "But you wouldn't have known I was going to kill you if I hadn't been the one to tell you. Doesn't that let you know I can be trusted?" "Frankly, I hope you won't be insulted. No. There's no way you'll trust me. Nothing comes to mind." Suddenly, Inigo raised his right hand high. "I swear on the soul of Domenico Montoya, you will reach the top alive." The man in black was silent for a long time. Then he looked up. I do not know this Domenico of yours, but something in your tone says I must believe you. Throw me the rope. Inigo quickly tied it around a rock, dropped it over. The man in black grabbed hold, hung suspended in air. Inigo pulled. In a moment, the man in black was beside him. Thank you, the man in black said, and he sank down on the rock. Inigo sat beside him. We'll wait until you're ready, he said. The man in black breathed deeply. Again, thank you. Why have you followed us? You carry baggage of much value. You have no intention of selling. We have no intention of selling, Inigo said. That is your business. And yours? The man in black made no reply. Inigo stood and walked away, surveying the terrain over which they would battle. It was a splendid plateau, really, filled with trees for dodging around, roots for tripping over, and small rocks for losing your balance on, and boulders for leaping off if you could climb them fast enough, and bathing everything, the entire spot, moonlight. No one could ask for a more suitable testing ground for a duel, Inigo decided. It had everything, including the marvelous cliffs at one end, beyond which was a wonderful 1,000-foot drop. Always something to bear in mind when one is planning tactics. It was perfect. The place was perfect. Provided the man in black could fence. Really fence. Inigo did then what he always did before a duel. He took the great sword from its scabbard and touched the side of the blade with his face 2 times. Once along one scar, once along the other. Then he examined the man in black. A fine sailor, yes. A mighty climber, no question. Courageous, without a doubt. But could he fence? Really fence? Please, Inigo thought. It has been so long since I have been tested. Let this man test me. Let him be a glorious swordman. Let him be both quick and fast, smart and strong. Give him a matchless mind for tactics, a background the equal of mine. Please, please, it's been so long. Let him be a master. I have my breath back now, the man in black said from the rock. Thank you for allowing me to rest. You best get on with it then, Inigo replied. The man in black stood. You seem a decent fellow, Inigo said. I hate to kill you. You seem a decent fellow, answered the man in black. I hate to die. It must be one, but one of us must, Inigo said. Begin. And so saying, he took the 6-fingered sword and put it in his left hand. He began all of his duels left-handed lately. It was good practice for him. And although he was the only living wizard in the world with his regular hand, the right, still, he was more than worthy with his left. Perhaps 30 men alive were his equal when he used his left hand. Perhaps as many as 50. Perhaps as few as 10. The man in black was also left-handed, and that warmed Inigo. It made things fairer. His weakness against the other man's strength. All to the good. They barely touched swords, and the man in black immediately began the Agrippa defense. When Inigo felt was sound, considering the rocky terrain, for the Agrippa kept the feet stationary at first, and made the changes of slipping minimal. Naturally, he countered with cape ferro, which surprised the man in black, but he defended well, quickly shifting out of the Agrippa and taking the attack himself, using the principles of Thibault. Inigo had to smile. No one had taken the attack against him in so long, it was thrilling. He let the man in black advance, let him build up courage, retreating gracefully between some trees, letting his Bonnetti defense keep him safe from harm. Then his legs flicked, and he was behind the nearest tree, and the man in black had not expected it and was slow reacting. Inigo flashed immediately out from the tree behind, attacking himself now, and the man in black retreated, stumbled, got his balance, continued moving away. Inigo was impressed with the quickness of the balance return. Most men the size of the man in black would have gone down, or at least fallen to one hand. The man in black did neither. He was simply quick-stepped, wrenched his body erect, continued fighting. They moved parallel to the cliffs now. The trees were behind them mostly. The man in black was slowly being forced toward a group of large boulders, for Inigo was anxious to see how well he moved when quarters were close up, when you could not thrust or parry with total freedom. He continued to force, and then the boulders were surrounding them. Inigo suddenly threw his body against a nearby rock, rebounded off it with stunning force, lunging with incredible speed. First blood was his. He had pinked the man in black, grazed him only along the left wrist. A scratch was all, but it was bleeding. Immediately, the man in black hurried his retreat, getting his position away from the boulders, getting out into the open of the plateau. Inigo followed, not bothering to check the other man's flight. There would always be time for that later. When the man in black launched his greatest assault, it came with no warning, and speed and strength of it were so terrifying. His blade flashed in the light again, and at first Inigo was only too delighted to retreat. He was not entirely familiar with the style of attack. It was mostly McBone, but there were snatches of capoeira thrown in. He continued moving backward while he concentrated on the enemy, figuring out the best way to stop the assault. The man in black kept advancing, and Inigo was aware that behind him now he was coming closer and closer to the edge of the cliffs. And that should not have concerned him less. But that could have not concerned him less. The important thing was to outthink the enemy, find his weakness, let him have his moment of exultation. Suddenly the cliffs came ever nearer. Inigo realized the fault of the attack was flashing at him. A simple thibalt maneuver would destroy it entirely, but he didn't want to give it away so soon. Let the other man have a triumph a moment longer. Life allowed so few. The cliffs were very close behind him now. Inigo continued to retreat. The man in black continued advancing. Then Inigo countered with the thibalt. The man in black blocked. He blocked it. Inigo repeated the thibalt move, and again it didn't work. He switched to capoeira. He tried Bonetti. He went to Fabrice. In desperation, he began a move used only twice. By Sankt, nothing worked. And the cliffs were almost there. Inigo never panicked, never came close. But he decided some things very quickly, because there was no time for large consultations. And what he decided was that although the man in black was reacting in slow to moves behind trees, and not much good at his boulders, movement was restricted, yet out in the open, where there was space, he was a terror. The left-handed, black-masked terror. "You are most excellent," he said. His rear foot was at the cliff edge. He could retreat no more. "Thank you," the man in black replied. "I have worked very hard to become so." "You are better than I am," Inigo admitted. "So it seems. But if that is true, then why are you smiling?" "Because," Inigo answered, "I know something you don't." "And what is that?" said the man in black. "I'm not left-handed," Inigo replied, and with those words he all but blew the 6-fingered sword into his right hand, and the tide of battle returned. The man in black retreated before the slashing of the great sword. He tried to sidestep, tried to parry, tried to somehow escape the doom, but that was now inevitable. But there was no way. He could block 50 thrusts. The 51st thrust flipped through, and now his left arm was bleeding. He could thwart 50 riposts, but not the 30. He could thwart 30 riposts, but not the 31st, and now his shoulder bled. The wounds were not yet grave. They kept on coming as they dodged across the stones, and the man in black found himself amidst the trees, and that was bad for him. So he all but fled before Inigo's onslaught. And then he was in the open again, but Inigo kept coming. Nothing could stop him, and the man in black was back up among the boulders. And that was even worse for him than the trees, and he shouted out in frustration, and practically ran to where there was open space again. There was no dealing with the wizard, and slowly again the deadly cliffs became a factor in the fight. Only now it was the man in black who was being forced to doom. He was brave, and he was strong, and the cuts did not make him beg for mercy, and he showed no fear behind his black mask. "You are amazing," he cried, as Inigo increased the already blinding speed of his blade. "Thank you. It has not come without effort." The death moment was now at hand. And again, Inigo thrust forward, and again, the man in black managed to ward off the attacks. But each time it was harder, and the strength in Inigo's wrists was endless, and he only thrust more fiercely. And soon the man in black grew weak. "You cannot tell," he said then, "because I wear a cape and a mask, but I'm smiling now." "Why?" "Because I'm not left-handed either," said the man in black. He too switched hands, and the battle was finally joined. And Inigo began to retreat. "Who are you?" he screamed. "No one of import. Another lover of the blade. I must know." "Get used to disappointment." They flashed along the open plateau, and the blades were both invisible. But oh, the earth trembled, and oh, the skies shook, and Inigo was losing. He tried to make for the trees, but the man in black would have none of it. He tried retreating to the boulders, but that was denied him too. And in the open, unthinkable as it was, the man in black was superior. Not much, but in a multitude of tiny ways, he was of a slightly higher quality. A hair quicker, a fraction stronger, a speck faster. Not really much at all, but it was enough. They met in the center of the plateau for the final assault. Neither man conceded anything. The sound of metal clashing metal rose. A final burst of thrust flew through Inigo's veins, and he made every attempt, tried every trick, even used every hour of every day of his years of experience. But he was blocked. By the man in black, he was shackled. By the man in black, he was baffled, thwarted, muzzled, beaten. By the man in black. A final flick, and the great six-fingered sword went flying from his hand. Inigo stood there helpless. Then he dropped to his knees, bowed his head, closed his eyes. "Do it quickly," he said. "May my hands fall from my wrists before I kill an artist like yourself," said the man in black. "I would as soon as destroyed Da Vinci. However," and here he clubbed Inigo's head with the butt of his sword, "since I can't have you following me either, please understand that I hold you in the highest respect." He struck one more time, and the Spaniard fell unconscious. The man in black quickly tied Inigo's hands around the tree and left him there for a moment, sleeping and helpless. Then he sheathed the sword, picked up the Sicilian's trail, and raced into the night. "He has beaten Inigo," the Turk said, not quite wanting to believe it, but positive the news had been sad. He liked Inigo. Inigo was the only one who wouldn't laugh when Fezzik asked him to play rhymes. They were hurrying along the mountainous path, the ways of the Gilded frontier. The path was narrow and strewn with rocks like cannonballs, so that the Sicilian had a terrible time keeping up with Fezzik. Fezzik carried Buttercup lightly on his shoulders. She was still tied hand and foot. "I can't hear you. Say it again," the Sicilian called out. So Fezzik waited for the hunchback to catch up to him. "See?" the Fezzik pointed out. Far down at the very bottom of the mountain path, the man in black could be seen running. "Inigo is beaten." "Inconceivable!" exploded the Sicilian. Fezzik never dared disagree with the hunchback. "I'm so stupid." Fezzik nodded. "Inigo has not lost to the man in black. He has defeated him. And to prove it, he has put on all the man in black's clothes and mask and hoods and boots and gained 80 pounds. The Sicilian squinted down toward the running figure. "Fool!" he hurled at the Turk. "After all these years, you can't tell Inigo when you see him. That isn't Inigo." "I'll never learn," the Turk agreed. "If there's ever a question about anything, you can always count on me to get it wrong. Inigo must have slipped, or been tricked, or otherwise unfairly beaten. That's the only conceivable explanation." Conceivable explanation, the giant thought. Only he didn't dare say it out loud. Not to the Sicilian. He might have whispered it to Inigo late at night. But that was before Inigo was dead. He might have also whispered, weavably, but that was as far as he got before the Sicilian started talking again. And that always meant he had to pay very strict attention. Nothing angered the hunchback as quickly as catching Fezzik thinking. Since he barely imagined someone as Fezzik capable of thought, he never asked him what was on his mind, because he couldn't have cared less. If he had found out Fezzik was making rhymes, he would have laughed and found a few ways to make Fezzik suffer. "Untie her feet," the Sicilian commanded. Fezzik put the princess down and ripped the ropes apart that bound her legs. Then he rubbed her ankles so she could walk. The Sicilian grabbed her immediately and yanked her away. "Catch up with us, quickly!" the Sicilian said. "Instructions?" Fezzik called, almost panicked. He hated being left on his own like this. "Finish him! Finish him!" The Sicilian was peeved. "Succeed, since Inigo failed us." "But I can't fence. I don't know how to fence." "Your way." The Sicilian could barely control himself now. "Oh, yes, good. My way. Thank you, Vizzini," the Fezzik said to the hunchback. Then, summoning his courage, "I need a hint." "You're always saying how you understand force, how force belongs to you. Use it. I don't care how. Wait for him behind there." He pointed to a sharp bend in the mountain path. "And crush his head like an eggshell." He pointed to the cannonball-sized rocks. "I could do that, yes." Fezzik nodded. He was marvelous at throwing heavy things. "It just seems not very sportsmanlike, doesn't it?" The Sicilian lost control. It was terrifying when he did that. With most people, they screamed and holler and jump around. With Vizzini, it was very different. He got very, very quiet, and his voice sounded like it came from a dead throat. And his eyes turned to fire. "I tell you this, and I tell it once. Stop the man in black. Stop him for good and all. If you fail, there will be no excuses. I will find another giant." "Please don't desert me," Fezzik said. "Then do as you are told." He grabbed hold of Buttercup again and hobbled the mountain path and out of sight. Fezzik glanced down toward the figure racing up the path toward him. Still a good distance away. Time enough to practice. Fezzik picked up a rock the size of a cannonball and aimed at the crack in the mountain 30 yards away. Swoosh! Dead center. He picked up a bigger rock and threw it at the shadow line twice as distant. Not quite swoosh. 2 inches to the right. Fezzik was reasonably satisfied. 2 inches off would still crush a head if you aimed for the center. He groped around, found a perfect rock for throwing. It just fit his hand. He then moved into the sharp turn of the path, backed off into the deepest shadow, unseen, silent. He waited patiently with his killing rock, counting the seconds until the man in black would die.